I'm not a nervous driver. I grew up on these roads outside Yakima, and I know every bend by heart. Same two-lane highway, same fields, same long stretches of nothing. My parents used to joke that by the time I got my license, the car could probably drive that route on its own. That night, I was coming home from my friend's wedding. My dress was bunched up under the seatbelt, my sneakers didn't match anything I was wearing, and my hair was held together with the last 4 bobby pins that survived the dancing. But the drive was calm, quiet, just me, the low music, and cruise control. It was around 11:30 p.m., late, but not anything weird happens late. The sky was clear, moon bright, traffic basically non-existent. I passed a farmhouse every now and then, a barn light in the distance, nothing unusual. I was replaying the wedding in my head. The first dance, the bad jokes in the speeches, the 2 friends I dropped off earlier who cried over absolutely nothing. It was that soft after-party exhaustion that somehow feels good. About 20 minutes from town, something appeared in my headlights. Just a dark lump at first. Could have been a trash bag, a tire, or one of the deer that love jumping into traffic. But as the car rolled closer, the shape stretched upward, got narrower. Then it turned into legs, then a torso, then a man. A man standing in the middle of my lane, not waving, not stumbling, not trying to flag me down, just standing, arms straight at his sides, body facing me like he'd been placed there. There was no shoulder wide enough to pull over safely. No car nearby, no movement except his head, which turned slightly as my headlights hit him. I tapped the brakes, but the idea of coming to a full stop with him right in front of me made my whole core clench. Farmland or not, it was still a dark highway with nobody around. I slowed more. He didn't move, didn't shield his eyes, didn't raise a hand. He just watched my car approach like he'd been waiting for it. Everything in me said, "Don't stop here." I eased into the oncoming lane, no cars in sight, and planned to pull over farther up where the road widened. I wasn't trying to ditch him completely. I just needed space and lights and some feeling of control. The moment I drew level with him, he moved. A sprint. I didn't see his full movement, just a blur of him launching toward the passenger side of my car. He cut across the beam of my headlights in this sharp diagonal, like he already knew exactly how many steps it would take to reach the door. There was a bump right near the handle. I don't remember deciding to accelerate. The engine just leapt, and suddenly the whole car was surging forward. My hands were locked around the wheel. I jerked back into my lane, tires buzzing over the lines, heart thundering loud enough I could feel it in my gums. When I looked in the rearview mirror, he was standing in the middle of the lane again, dead still. I didn't slow down again until I reached the first gas station on the outskirts of a small town. Bright lights, people, camera systems, civilization. I pulled in, threw the car into park, and sat there with my breath all uneven and my fingers tingling. My eyes kept jumping to the windows, expecting to see him jogging up the ramp toward me. When I finally got out, I went straight to the passenger side. There was a faint smear, maybe grease, just under the handle. A small scuff where something slid. Inside, I called the non-emergency number. I didn't want sirens. I didn't want to sound dramatic. I just wanted someone to know. The dispatcher said they'd had earlier reports of a pedestrian in the roadway. Their tone told me they weren't taking it seriously. Probably assumed he was drunk or high. But drunk people don't stand that still. They don't sprint at your door with that kind of precision. They don't stop again like mannequins afterward. I didn't argue with the dispatcher. I just thanked them and hung up. Driving home afterward, every shadow looked like a person waiting. I kept my doors locked and one hand on my phone, even though I knew deep down that if he wanted my car earlier, he'd almost gotten it. The next day, I checked the paint again in the sunlight. The smear was still there. For the rest of the week, my brain latched onto possibilities. None of them comforting. What if he was injured and I just drove past? What if someone else was hiding in the ditch waiting for me to stop? What if he was bait? What if I was one more mile from something I wasn't meant to survive? Some people ask why I didn't stop, why I didn't check on him, why I didn't try harder. And I don't have an answer that makes me feel heroic. Just the truth. Something was wrong with him. Wrong in a way I still don't have a good name for. Wrong in a way my instincts recognized before my brain did. And out on a dark highway in the middle of nowhere, instincts are sometimes the only thing standing between you and disappearing into the night. I still feel guilty when I think about him, but I also picture his sudden sprint, the thump on my door, the way he reset himself like a glitching video game character. If you're standing dead center in a highway lane at night, not moving, not speaking, not reacting, I'm not your first emergency call. And now, I don't slow down for shapes anymore. Not until I know exactly what and who I'm looking at. I'm a high school English teacher, which means I spend most of the year drowning in essays, coffee, and teenage drama. So when summer break finally hit, I packed up my little hatchback and decided to drive between national parks. Just me, cheap motels, and long stretches of highway where nobody needed me for anything. By the time I reached Amarillo, I'd been driving 8 hours straight. My legs were stiff, my eyes dry, and my car looked like I'd been living out of it. Which, to be fair, I kind of was. The motel I picked was exactly the kind you picture when you think roadside stop. Big glowing sign, 2 floors, exterior doors, cars parked inches from each room. Not fancy, not creepy, just a place to sleep and leave. The front desk clerk looked barely awake. Hoodie, messy hair, sitcom playing on a TV behind him. He didn't seem concerned about much in the world. "One night?" he asked. "Yep," I said. He typed with one hand, printed my Wi-Fi slip with the other, and slid me a key card in one of those little cardboard sleeves. Room 112. Ground floor. Around the corner. The walkway outside was lit by those tall yellow buzzing lights. A couple sat smoking outside their room. A TV flickered through curtains a few doors down, and the air still held that heavy late summer heat. My keycard blinked green on the first try. The room was exactly the level of depressing I expected. Patterned bedspread, squeaky AC, wooden table with 2 mismatched chairs. Cleanish, though. I've stayed in worse on school trips. I locked the door, main lock first, then the swing latch, and said the same thing I always say when I settle into a motel. Okay, now it's my space. I showered, changed into a giant t-shirt, set my alarm, and lay across the bed, scrolling until my eyes blurred. Then I put my phone down and drifted off. Sometime around midnight, I woke up to a sound that didn't belong. A metallic rattle. The handle. I stayed still, listening. Maybe it was pipes, maybe it was someone at the wrong door. Motels aren't quiet places. Then I heard the beep. That unmistakable electronic chirp of a keycard being swiped. And the lock clicked. Whoever was outside pressed down on the handle again. The swing latch caught, keeping the door from opening. I sat up fast. My first thought wasn't fear, it was annoyance. The clerk messed up the room assignment. Someone else thinks this is theirs. Teacher brain, always assuming it's an admin error. I cleared my throat and called out, "Someone's in here." The handle stopped. Silence. I waited, hoping to hear an embarrassed apology or footsteps leaving. Instead, a low male voice mumbled something through the door. I couldn't make out the words. There was no knock, no sorry, just another beep of a card, and another attempt on the handle. This time it pushed harder against the latch, like the person wasn't confused. They were persistent. Adrenaline hit me. I slid off the bed quietly, grabbed my phone, and backed up until I was against the far wall. "Wrong room," I said, louder, trying to keep my tone firm. The handle stopped again. He didn't walk away. I can't explain how I knew he was still there. I could feel his presence through the wood. I imagined him standing inches from me with only a deadbolt and a metal latch separating us. I pulled up the front desk number from the Wi-Fi slip with trembling fingers and hit call. 2 rings. "Front desk," the clerk said. I kept my voice low, Someone is trying to get into room 112 with a working key card. The latch is stopping it, but they've tried multiple times. The clerk paused like he needed a second to understand the words. No one else should have access to that room, he said. You're the only one checked into 112. Well, someone's out there using a key, I whispered. Stay inside. I'm coming down the walkway right now. As soon as he said that, the handle outside moved one last time. Then, footsteps. Fading. I approached the door and looked through the peephole. Nothing. The walkway was empty. All doors closed. No shadows moving. No one turning a corner. Maybe 30 seconds later, someone knocked. Front desk. I checked the peephole again before touching the latch. It was definitely the clerk this time. He kept a few steps back from the door, hands in his hoodie pockets, looking around nervously. I walked straight here, he said. Didn't see anyone. No one passed me. He offered to move me upstairs, but the idea of walking along the balcony in pajamas while whoever was out there lurked somewhere didn't feel great either. I told him I'd stay put and thanked him. I slept maybe an hour total the rest of the night. In the morning, I packed up, checked out, and asked the clerk again if there had been any mix-up. No double assignment, he said. No other keys issued. I checked everything. I hesitated, then asked, "Can you look at the lock log? Every swipe is recorded automatically. Teachers love data, and that's why I knew this existed." He pulled up a screen filtered for room 112 and tilted the monitor slightly. "There," he said. 9:30 p.m. Your check-in." He scrolled. "And nothing else." "No attempts around midnight?" I asked. "No," he said. "The lock didn't register anything." I stared at the screen. The list was short, just one entry. Mine. "That's not possible," I said. "I heard it beep, twice." And the latch stopped the door from opening. He looked genuinely unsettled. It would be in the system if a card worked, unless... He didn't finish the sentence. Honestly, I'm not sure I wanted him to. I left, and for the rest of my trip, every motel door suddenly felt thinner. Every beep in a hallway, every rattle, every footstep outside. I listened harder. I still stay at roadside motels, but I don't take ground floor rooms anymore. I always ask for an inside hallway, higher floor, double locks. And sometimes when I'm half asleep somewhere unfamiliar, I'll hear it in my memory, that little electronic chirp. The sound of someone telling my door, I belong in there, even if the system swears they never existed. I run a small travel channel online. Nothing huge, just enough subscribers that I feel guilty if I go too long without posting, but not enough that anyone recognizes me at gas stations. My thing is calm road trip vibes. Long drives, coastal overlooks, time lapses of clouds, stuff people put on in the background while they clean. That's how I ended up on the Oregon coast last summer, with my SUV crammed full of camera gear and energy drinks. If you've never driven that route, it feels unreal. Pines bending toward the ocean, cliffs that drop straight down into whitewater, fog pulling across the road in sheets. I spent the whole day doing what I always do, stopping every few miles, dragging out gear, chasing light like it's a sport. There was one overlook I'd bookmarked for weeks. Small gravel lot, wooden guardrail, view straight out to the horizon. I pulled in near sunset. A couple cars were already there, a minivan with kids climbing around inside, and a silver sedan parked a few spaces down. The sedan caught my eye only because its driver was standing by the rail, hands in his pockets, staring out at the water. Normal stuff. I got to work immediately, mounted my GoPro on the back of my SUV, angled it so the car framed the shot and the coastline filled the background. Heard the little beep, saw the red light flash, and walked toward the rail to get wider angles. Wind was strong. My tripod kept wobbling, so I had to keep fixing it. Waves boomed against the rocks way below. At some point, when I turned back toward my SUV, the man from the silver sedan had moved. He wasn't at the rail anymore. He was standing closer to my car now, maybe one stall over, sort of facing my direction. He wasn't staring at me, wasn't smiling. just repositioned. I shrugged it off. People wander around these spots. I swapped lenses, moved the GoPro to a slightly different angle, ran another long take, did my usual wrap-up. After 20 minutes or so, I felt satisfied, shut off the GoPro, and headed back to my car. The man had drifted back toward the rail by then. I gave him a nod. He didn't react much. Maybe he didn't see. Harmless moment. I drove away thinking nothing of it. That night, after checking into a cheap motel inland, the kind with humming ice machines and carpet that feels slightly damp no matter what, I dumped all my footage onto my laptop. Editing on the road is ritual. It keeps me grounded. So I opened the GoPro folder and clicked on the first clip. It was exactly what I expected. My SUV in the foreground, ocean behind, wind noise, soft gray light. In the distance, near the rail, there was a small dark shape. A person, probably the man from the sedan. Nothing weird. I clicked into the second clip. Same frame, same angle, but now the person wasn't by the rail. He was closer. Directly behind my SUV, standing almost centered in the shot. His back was to the ocean. His body was angled toward the camera, frowned and scrubbed between the first two clips. Clip 1, figure by the rail. Clip 2, figure behind my car. Strange, but okay. Maybe he moved around a lot. I opened the third clip. Different angle slightly, more to the side, but the back of my SUV was still in frame. And again, there he was. Same jacket, same height, same stillness. Standing behind my car, facing the camera. It wasn't the guy wandering around, it was the repetition that got me. He appeared in every clip I'd taken at that overlook. Every single one. Sometimes tiny in the distance, sometimes closer. But always directly behind my vehicle, like he'd intentionally placed himself there each time the GoPro was rolling. I zoomed in on one frame. It pixelated fast, but you could make out more. Pale face, dark hair, expression blank. His head was turned just enough that he looked like he was staring straight into the lens. I paused, trying to replay my memory. I remembered seeing him by the rail. I remembered seeing him once standing sort of near my SUV. But I did not remember him being behind my car every time I hit record. And I definitely didn't remember him standing that close. I checked timestamps. The clips were spread over roughly 25 minutes. Enough time for me to move around, record, reposition gear. But in every file, the moment recording began, he was already in position. That's when the feeling started creeping in. He wasn't in my shots by accident. He was placing himself there, waiting for the red light to blink on, watching where I set up the camera. Then, I opened my dashcam footage from the drive afterward. I scrubbed until I reached the part where I left the overlook. At the far left edge of the wide-angle view, my SUV pulled out onto the road. 3 seconds later, the silver sedan followed in the exact same direction, just far enough back to mirror my speed. We went like that for miles. Curves, open stretches, a few elevation drops. Nothing crazy, nothing illegal. But the whole time, the sedan stayed behind me. Eventually, I took an exit for gas. I scrubbed further. The camera angle changed as I entered the station's lot, and the sedan was gone. I sat there in that motel room, replaying all those shots of my SUV with the water behind it, and this man repositioning himself behind my car every time the camera turned on. The strangest part wasn't that he followed my car for a stretch. It was how still he stood in the footage. Almost posed. No shifting weight, no hands moving, no scratches or fidgeting, or normal human movements. Like he knew how to stand perfectly still for the lens, like he'd done it before. I thought about calling the police, but the second the idea formed, it felt silly. Someone looked into my camera too many times isn't exactly a crime. So I didn't report anything. And when I edited the final travel video, I cut the footage entirely. I told the story in voiceover because my viewers like behind-the-scenes weirdness, but I never put his image on screen. He doesn't get to be content. Since then, I pay attention to things I never used to. When I set up a tripod, I scan the area twice, once for the shot, once for anyone who seems a little too aware of where my camera's pointing. When I back away from the lens, I watch reflections in windows behind me. Because that day on the Oregon coast taught me something I'd never really considered. Sometimes you're not the only one filming. Sometimes you're the one being watched. I became a nurse because I can't stand the feeling of doing nothing. I'm the person who runs towards someone yelling for help, not away from them. That's why this story still gets under my skin. It's the only time I chose to leave someone behind, or thought I did. This happened in 2022, while I was driving cross country for a new job. My little car was packed with everything I owned. 2 suitcases, boxes, my houseplants wedged between the seats. I was somewhere along I-80 in Nebraska. Long, flat miles of nothing. Late afternoon, I remember the sun turning everything orange. I had a podcast playing, some emergency medicine show where nurses tell weird stories. The kind of dark humor that only makes sense when you work in healthcare. I remember feeling proud and weirdly calm, thinking about the new chapter ahead. Traffic was light. Just me, a couple semis, an occasional pickup. And then I saw the car on the shoulder. It was pulled over crooked, like someone had jerked the wheel at the last second. The hazard lights blinking. Next to it, a woman was waving. One arm high, the other pointing toward a cluster of trees past the ditch. From far off, it looked like a genuine emergency. As I got closer, I saw her face. Flushed, streaked, desperate. She was clearly mouthing, "Please." So I pulled onto the shoulder behind her car, leaving a little distance so I wouldn't get boxed in. Hazards on. Foot on the brake. She rushed to my window the second I cracked it. "Oh my God, thank you," she said, breathless. "My husband slipped. He's down in the trees. I think his leg is broken. I can't get him up. I don't have reception. Please, can you just come look? You're younger. You'll be able to get down there." Her voice was shaky, but something about the details hit me wrong almost immediately. Her jeans were spotless. No dirt on her hands. No mud on her shoes. Even though the slope past the ditch looked steep and crumbly. She didn't look like someone who'd been climbing in and out of trees or trying to pull a grown man uphill. "I'll call 911, I told her, reaching for my phone. I had one bar. Not great, but enough. She shook her head hard. No, it'll take too long. He's right down there. Just come with me, please." Her urgency felt misaligned, like an actor reading lines at the wrong speed. "Did you try calling from your car?" I asked. "It's dead," she said, immediately. And behind her, the hazard lights kept blinking, powered by the dead battery she mentioned. "I'm going to call anyway," I said. She stared at me, like the answer wasn't what she expected, like I'd taken a step off the script. I hit the emergency call button. While I explained the situation to the dispatcher, the woman kept talking over me, insisting I didn't understand that her husband couldn't wait. She kept motioning toward the trees, repeating that word, "Please." I wasn't ignoring her, but something in me was shifting. It wasn't fear yet. More like every small red flag suddenly connecting into a bigger one. As I gave the dispatcher my mile marker, I looked in the driver's side mirror. Just a quick automatic check. At first I thought I was seeing a shadow behind my trunk, but as my eyes focused, the shape sharpened into a person. Someone was crouched low directly behind my car. I didn't move my head. I didn't react. I watched through the mirror as the silhouette moved slightly, like adjusting their balance, just enough to confirm it wasn't a bush or weird lighting. There was something in their hand, maybe metal, maybe just something catching the sunlight, but it instantly tightened something in my chest. "Ma'am, are you safe to stay there?" the dispatcher asked. "No," I said quietly. "I think this is a setup. There's someone hiding behind my car." My hand was already on the gear shift. The woman at my window was still pleading, still pointing at the trees, but the tone of her voice had changed. Softer, less panicked, like she could sense the shift. "I'm going to drive off. I told the dispatcher. I'm not getting out. Do not exit your vehicle, he repeated. Remerge when it's safe. I put the car in drive and rolled forward. The woman stepped back quickly, her expression tightening into something that definitely wasn't gratitude. Are you serious? She snapped. You can't just leave us. I didn't answer. I eased back onto the highway, watching her in the rearview mirror. She stopped waving, then she turned toward the ditch. A man climbed up into view, taller than I expected, hood pulled up, the object still in his hand. He stood beside her, both of them watching my car move away. Neither of them looked toward the trees, neither acted like someone was hurt. I didn't speed away recklessly. I kept talking to the dispatcher until I reached the next exit. My hands were shaking so badly by then that I had to park at a gas station just to breathe. A trooper called me later that night. They'd reached the mile marker I gave them. They found the car on the shoulder. But no people, no one around. No sign anyone was injured, no footprints in the ditch, no movement in the trees. Just the car, locked, sitting at an angle. The next day in my motel room, the guilt landed hard, because nurses don't ignore people waving for help. We run toward the yelling, the crying, the danger. It's built into us. And that afternoon, I did the opposite. I left someone behind, even if that someone might have been bait. I replay the whole moment sometimes, not to scare myself, but to remind myself why instincts matter. Her spotless clothes, the way she avoided every question about calling for help, the rehearsed panic, the crouched figure behind my trunk, waiting for me to open my door and step out of the safe metal box I was in. I tell this story the same way every time. I became a nurse so I wouldn't be the person who drives away. But that day, I did. And I'd rather live with that guilt than end up being a story someone else has to tell. I make my living taking photos in places most people only stop to stretch their legs. Deserts, overlooks, odd stretches of road with nothing but sky on one side and miles of rock on the other. You learn to be comfortable with quiet when you do this long enough. In 2022, I was out near Lake Powell planning a week of sunrise and night sky shots. Instead of burning money on motels, I slept in the back of my SUV. I've done it 100 times. Find a legal turnout, crack a window, set my alarm, and call it a night. This particular turnout was perfect. A cracked strip of asphalt, a railing that didn't actually guard anything, and enough distance from the nearest main road that headlights barely reached me. No other cars, no campsites, nothing but open desert. I always keep my dash cam on at night. It's set with a motion sensor that sends a ping to my phone anytime something moves in front of the car. 99% of the time, it's a moth or a rabbit or a big dust tumble. Still, it makes me feel better. I stretched out in the back, wrapped up in my sleeping bag, batteries charging beside me. The desert was cooling fast, the sky perfectly clear. One of those nights you almost want to stay awake because it's too peaceful to waste. Sometime after midnight, my phone buzzed. Motion detected. I opened the app immediately. The live view loaded. Nothing but rocks and scrub. No animal, no person, no movement. I put the phone down. Not even 10 minutes later, another alert. I opened the feed again. Still nothing. The exact same scene, still as a painting. I sat there listening, like maybe the desert would explain itself. Nothing but soft wind and the tiny clicking of my cooling engine. A third alert came a few minutes later. This one annoyed me. I opened the live view, waited, squinted. My eyes searched the whole frame, looking for a blur, a shadow, the bounce of something moving. Completely empty. I checked the notification log. All the alerts were evenly spaced. Coincidence, sure, but weird coincidence. The fourth ping came as I was finally drifting back towards sleep. Then something clicked for me. These alerts weren't popping when I was rolling around. They were coming the moment I got still again. Like something approached, only when I let myself relax. I sat up, turned on the interior lights, and checked every window. The glass turned into mirrors, All I could see was the reflection of my own tired face. "Let's just end this," I muttered. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside. The air was colder than I expected. My boots made loud sounds on the asphalt. I did a slow walk around the SUV, sweeping my beam across the dirt, the scrub, the edge of the turnout. No footprints beyond mine, no tire tracks that didn't belong, no fresh disturbances, nothing. Not even a hint of something alive nearby. I made myself stand still for a moment, just listening. It was so quiet that I could hear my own breathing. I wasn't scared exactly, more like focused, waiting for proof that something out there actually existed. But there was nothing. I got back inside, locked the doors twice, and slid into the front seat. I figured if the sensor went off again, I'd see it with my own eyes this time. The phone sat in my hand. The windshield framed that same slice of desert. I stared until my eyes burned. Eventually, my shoulders loosened again. My body started leaning back towards sleep. Motion alert. I opened the app instantly, no hesitation. The live feed flickered. For a split second, there was a distortion right at the bottom edge of the frame, like something passed directly in front of the lens. Not a shape I could name, not a person, not an animal. Just movement so close, the camera couldn't interpret it cleanly. The windshield in front of me stayed completely unchanged. I was looking at the same spot the camera was looking at, and yet the camera saw something I didn't. I just stayed there, holding the phone, the light from the screen washing over the empty desert outside. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. Just watched. No second alert came, no shadow crossed the hood, no sound outside. But the part of me that pays attention to tiny details, the part that makes me good at what I do, kept whispering that whatever caused the distortion had to be inches from the camera. Too close for the lens to capture, too low for me to see through the windshield. Something right up against the front of the vehicle. I knew then I wasn't sleeping again that night. I started the car. The headlights blasted the turnout. If something had been crouched there, it didn't stick around to enjoy the bright light. The rocks and scrub looked the same as before. Flat, empty, harmless. I pulled back onto the road and drove non-stop into town. Later that morning, in the motel parking lot, I reviewed the saved clips. Every time the alert triggered, the camera captured a short video. Most showed nothing, but in several clips, a few frames had the exact same distortion at the bottom edge. A flicker of movement so close it warped the image. It wasn't enough to screenshot or to show a face. Just enough to convince me the sensor wasn't malfunctioning. Just enough to prove something really was there. I didn't call the police. What would I even report? Something invisible waved at my camera? There was no crime, no threat, no physical evidence. Just repeated motion alerts and empty footage with distortions I could barely admit I saw. What I did do was book a cheap motel for the rest of the trip, and every trip after that. People laugh when I tell them I don't sleep in the car anymore. I joke that bed bugs are better than desert ghosts. They think I'm being dramatic. Truth is, I've spent years waiting behind lenses for something interesting to move. That night, something waited for me to sleep instead. And that's the first time in my life I've been genuinely grateful a camera didn't show me everything. If any of tonight's stories made you grip your steering wheel a little tighter, you're officially part of the MN family. Smash that like button, subscribe so you never miss the next scare, and tell me in the comments which story messed with you the most. And if you think gas stations are the safest places to stop, I've got a video that's about to ruin that for you. Click now to watch 4 creepy gas station horror stories. Or stay right here. The algorithm has another
There is something about taking a weekend away from everything that just hits different. A quiet cabin, a couple days with no noise, maybe some snacks and a playlist. For most people, that is the dream. But for one guy named Mason, his relaxing weekend getaway turned into something he wishes he never booked in the first place. Imagine this. Mason finds this tiny cabin online, around 2 hours outside the city. The listing looked completely normal, nothing strange about it. Warm lights on the porch, a short wooden deck, a pretty view of the woods. Everything about it screamed peaceful weekend energy. You know, that vibe where you feel like you are escaping everything for a little bit. But the moment he stepped out of his car, he felt the air change. Not scary movie heavy, but heavy in a way that made the whole place feel like it was holding its breath. He tried to ignore it. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he needed food. He pushed the thought away and walked inside. The cabin looked exactly like the pictures. Clean, cozy. Clearly someone had prepared it, but something was missing. Silence. Real silence. Most quiet places feel calming. This one felt like it was paying attention to him, like the silence had a weight, and that weight was on him. Still, he tried to relax. He put his bag down, made some coffee, opened the curtains to let in light, and instantly felt his stomach drop. Because the curtains were closed when he walked in. He swore every picture in the listing had the curtains open. Big windows, nice light, that whole nature getaway aesthetic. But now, when he pulled them apart, the window behind them was foggy. Not the normal cold outside, warm inside type of fog. More like someone had breathed on it from very, very close. He wiped the glass. He told himself it was nothing. Old windows do weird stuff. But the moment he stepped back toward the kitchen, he heard it. The softest tap, tap. So light it barely registered, like a fingernail gently touching the window. He froze. He did not turn around right away. When he finally did, the window looked clean again. The room was still, but the curtains, the ones he had pushed all the way open, were now halfway closed. He felt a little uncomfortable, so he stepped outside for air. The woods looked normal, calm, birds and wind like usual. But when he turned back to the cabin, something looked off. On the side of the cabin was a small second window, one he had never seen in the pictures. And this window was covered from the inside with wooden planks. They did not look old or damaged. They looked new, fresh wood, neatly nailed. The cabin was small enough that he should have seen that area from inside, but he had not. The interior shape did not match the outside shape. He tried to ignore the uneasy feeling. He told himself it was just a weird design choice. He went back inside, tried watching something on his laptop, tried reading. But the whole time he kept hearing tiny shifts in the wooden frame of the cabin, soft creaks, light thumps, the kind of sounds that make you imagine footsteps when you know there should not be any. Every time he looked out the window, the porch was empty. Evening crept in faster than he expected. The cabin dimmed quickly, and the moment darkness settled, the air changed. It felt warmer but heavy, like the walls were slightly closer than before. Shadows stretched in ways that made him feel surrounded. At one point, he heard something inside the bedroom, a soft, dragging sound across the floor. Not loud, not fast, just slow and steady, like something being pulled. He did not want to look, but he forced himself to walk toward the room. Everything looked normal, at first. But the closet door was cracked open. Just a small gap, like someone had pushed it gently with a fingertip. Earlier, he was sure it had been fully shut. Now, here's the part that truly scared him. He never opened that closet. And from where he had been standing earlier in the day, he would have noticed if it was open even a little. He grabbed his keys. Weekend trip or not, he was done. He didn't care how much time was left on the booking. He just wanted to leave. Before stepping out, he glanced back one last time. And there they were, the curtains. The ones he kept pushing open, the ones that somehow moved by themselves. They were now fully closed, perfectly straight, perfectly aligned, not messy or rushed, almost like someone had taken their time closing them carefully. He didn't think twice. He walked out, got in his car, and left. He didn't even lock the door. Halfway down the road, his phone buzzed. A new message. It was from the rental owner. The message said, "Please remember to leave the curtains closed. It keeps things calm." No explanation, no follow-up, just that. Mason blocked the number instantly. He never asked what "things" was referring to. He didn't want to know. But he told me something strange. Every few months, completely at random, he says he sees that same style of curtain somewhere. A hotel lobby, a coffee shop window, even a random house on a street he doesn't remember driving down. And every time he sees them, he feels the same air pressure, the same heaviness, the same quiet feeling. Almost like the weekend he tried to escape is still following him in small, subtle ways.
Weekend road trips are usually top tier. Music blasting, snacks ready, windows down. It is the kind of vibe that makes you forget everything stressful for a moment. But for a girl named Luna, one late night drive almost became the kind of story people share in whispers, the kind that makes you rethink taking a familiar road at night. Luna was heading to visit her cousin 2 towns over. She had driven the same route so many times she could probably do it with her eyes closed. But this time, she left later than planned. By the time she reached the highway, the sky was fully dark. The kind of dark where the horizon disappears. At first, everything was calm. The roads were empty, the night air was quiet, and the whole vibe felt peaceful. But then she started noticing small things that did not make sense. The highway lights looked dimmer than usual, not broken or flickering, just weak, like the bulbs were losing energy, or like something was pulling light away from them. Then she saw the exit signs. They were in the right places, but the numbers were wrong, different from what she remembered. She assumed new construction or updated labeling. She shrugged it off. Small details, no problem. But 20 minutes later, she glanced at her GPS and realized it had frozen, completely frozen. The arrow was stuck in the same location, and the estimated time was not moving at all. She tapped the screen. Nothing. She restarted the app. Nothing. She even force-closed it and reopened it. Still frozen. Then her radio cut out.
Not static, not noise, just sudden silence. The kind of silence that feels intentional. Luna kept driving, but something felt off. The trees along the road seemed taller than usual. The sky looked darker, even though she had not left the main highway, and the air inside her car felt colder. Not breezy, just cold, like she had rolled down the window even though she had not touched anything. After a few more miles, she saw someone standing on the side of the road. A figure, completely still, not waving, not moving, just standing there, facing away from her. She slowed a little, trying to convince herself it was a bored pedestrian, or maybe a stranded traveler. But the moment her headlights passed the figure, they flickered, only for a second. And when the light steadied, the figure was gone. No footsteps, no movement, no sign of anyone. Her heart started racing. She pressed the gas, wanting to get to her cousin's house as fast as possible. Suddenly, her GPS blinked back to life, but the screen made even less sense than before. It claimed she was 73 miles from her cousin's house, a drive that usually took 15 minutes from where she was. The route kept shifting, constant recalculations, arrows moving in strange directions. The app felt confused, like it did not know what road she was on. Then she saw an exit ramp she recognized. Finally, something normal, except the road sign above it was blank, completely blank. A green sign with no words, no numbers, nothing. She hesitated, but her gut screamed at her to take it, and so she did. As she turned onto the ramp, her phone buzzed with a single notification. Just one sentence. Return to main road. It wasn't from her GPS, not from any app she had installed. It was plain text, with no sender name. Her chest tightened. She ignored the message and kept driving, but the ramp led to a small roundabout. She circled it once, then twice, then a third time, and by the fourth loop, she realized something was wrong. Every possible turn led back to the same intersection, the same cracked pavement, the same flickering streetlight, the same trees on the side. She was stuck in a loop, a real loop. No matter which exit she took, she ended up back at the same spot. On her next loop, she finally saw something different. A narrow road branching off to the right, a road that had not been there on the previous turns. She didn't think twice, and she took it. Suddenly, a pair of headlights appeared behind her, turning onto the same road, keeping the exact same distance from her, not speeding up, not slowing down, just matching her speed like it was tethered to her. The car had no plates, no labels, no stickers, nothing to identify it, just a dark vehicle with low beams that seemed weirdly focused on her. That's when her GPS spoke out loud. Do not stop. Her phone wasn't even open to the map app. The screen was black. She pushed the accelerator harder. The road around her slowly shifted back to something she recognized. Roadside lights, gas station signs, billboards she remembered passing 100 times before. Everything seemed to snap back into reality. She merged onto the main highway without even realizing how she got there. And the car behind her? Gone. No taillights, no engine noise, just gone, as if it had never been there at all. She reached her cousin's house shaking. Her phone buzzed nonstop, notifications piling up, all of them saying the same thing. Return to main road. Not from a random number, not from an app, from her own number. When she checked her call log, every message showed the sender as her own phone. like the warning had come from whatever part of the road she shouldn't have taken, or whatever she had driven past on that dark, unfamiliar version of the highway. She does not drive at night anymore. Not alone. Not ever.
Most weekend gigs are supposed to be easy money. Clock in, do what needs to be done, head home, spend the rest of the day chillin'. A guy named Theo thought he was getting exactly that when he agreed to cover a weekend inventory shift at the storage facility he worked at. It was a simple place. 2 long hallways, storage units on both sides, motion sensor lights, and cameras that basically recorded everything, whether someone was there or not. He'd worked there for a year and genuinely believed he'd already seen the most boring parts of the job. But the second he walked up to the building that Saturday morning, something already felt off. The front door was unlocked, and that alone was strange because the manager was the kind of person who double-checked locks even when the building was already empty. Theo stood there for a moment, trying to convince himself that maybe another employee had forgotten to relock it. But still, a weird way to start the day. Inside, the air felt different. Too still. Too cold. Like someone had set the AC way lower than usual. But when he checked the thermostat, it showed the normal temperature. He brushed it off and headed into the first hallway. The motion lights turned on one by one, bright and predictable, except for the third light. That one stayed completely dead. He tried waving his hands under it, even jumping a little to mess with the sensor, but the light refused to turn on. He told himself he'd write a maintenance note later and continued. As he passed Unit 14, he felt that familiar uneasiness again. That particular unit always gave him strange vibes, like the air near it was denser or heavier than the rest of the hallway. Every time he walked by it, he felt a weird pressure in his ears, almost like altitude change. He had always blamed it on the building being old, but today the colder air around that door felt more noticeable, almost intentional. He finished the first hallway and moved on to the second. Everything seemed fine at first, lights flicking on, his footsteps echoing, usual empty building quiet. But then he reached Unit 27. Its lock was undone. This was a major problem. Storage units were supposed to stay locked at all times. Theo slowly opened the door and found the entire space empty, completely cleared out. No dust patterns on the ground, no box marks, nothing. Just smooth concrete like no one had ever stored a thing there. It didn't make sense because the logbook showed that the owner of that unit hadn't checked in for months. He locked it again, made a note, and kept going. But as he walked away, he heard a tiny metallic sound behind him, like the soft turn of a lock. He turned back. Unit 27 was unlocked again. The door was slightly open this time, and the lights above it flickered in this rhythmic pattern that didn't feel random, almost like a signal. Theo felt his chest tighten, but forced himself to push the door open one more time. The unit looked the same, empty, but something about the back wall was different now. There was a faint square outline, like a hidden panel or door. When he pressed his hand against it, it felt cold, almost freezing, even though the rest of the building wasn't. He backed away and closed the unit quickly, locking it with extra force. He pulled out his phone to check the hallway camera footage on this facility's security app. When he tried to view the moment the lock turned on its own, the footage froze, then skipped 10 seconds ahead, like it couldn't register that part at all. Every time he rewound, the same glitch happened. He checked other cameras. Most looked normal, but the ones aimed at the second hallway, specifically the stretch covering units 14 through 27, were grainy and distorted, like the lens had warped or the video was bending. As he zoomed in on Unit 14's feed,
the motion light at the entrance of the hallway turned on. But no one was there. He felt a wave of adrenaline spike in his chest, but he told himself he was overthinking. Empty buildings are naturally creepy. He convinced himself it was nothing and forced himself to finish the shift. Hours later, around 3 p.m., he heard something, soft but unmistakable. 3 knocks, coming from Unit 14. He froze instantly. It didn't sound like pipes or machinery cooling down. It sounded like someone calmly knocking from inside the unit. He stood perfectly still, listening, trying to figure out if maybe he imagined it. Then the knocking came again. Same rhythm, same sound. 3 taps. Theo backed away slowly, not taking his eyes off the door. That's when the motion lights in the hallway all shut off at once, plunging everything into darkness. He waved his arms, trying to trigger them, but nothing turned back on. His phone flashlight barely lit anything. The weak beam landed directly on Unit 14's door, which was now just barely open. That was the breaking point. He didn't check, he didn't look closer. He turned and sprinted toward the exit. Halfway down the hallway, he heard footsteps behind him, slow, steady, matching his pace, but not running, like someone following calmly, almost curious. He refused to look back. He slammed through the exit door and ran straight to his car. When he started the engine and glanced at the building, the hallway lights turned back on, one by one, in a slow wave, like they were acknowledging he was leaving. On Monday, Theo quit immediately. No explanation, no final paycheck, nothing. A week later, the manager texted him asking why he hadn't returned his security badge. He replied with one line, "I'm not going back into that building." The manager never answered, but 2 days later, Theo saw a job posting online. Same facility, same hours, same units. And nothing in the listing mentioned why they suddenly needed more staff.
After years of hospital night shifts, I can tell the difference between actual danger and background noise. You learn to sort things into two categories: worth getting up for and ignore it. That Thanksgiving at my parents' house didn't feel any different at first. Just a cozy holiday wrapped in the usual chaos of aging parents. Their place is one of those old two-story homes built before insulation was a thing. Pipes click, floorboards complain under every step, and the basement has a constant faint smell of damp cardboard. My parents treat it like a storage unit: boxes, chest freezer, and a furnace that looks ready to retire. I came home that year because my dad's blood pressure had been creeping up, and my mom had no business climbing step stools to dig out tablecloths. I slipped right back into caretaker mode, checking my dad's meds, telling my mom the stuffing didn't need just a little more salt, and eyeing the timer on the turkey like it was a cardiac monitor. Everything was normal, right up until the basement light turned on by itself. We were halfway through dinner when I noticed it, a thin glow under the basement door. We never leave that light on. My dad waved it off, saying he must have grabbed something earlier and forgot to pull the chain. I stood, cracked the basement door just enough to look down. The bulb was still glowing, and the pull chain was moving, just slightly, like it had been tugged a few seconds earlier. No footsteps, no voices, no one down there. I shut the door, told myself the chain probably swung when I opened it.
Nationwide is so much more than a great insurance company. They're one of America's largest financial services companies, like how I'm.
And went back to the table. An hour later, the light was on again. This time, no one had been near the door, and I knew it. We'd all been in the same room, arguing about whether the parade floats counted as real Thanksgiving traditions or just background TV noise. The swing in the chain was more obvious this time, an arc still slowing down. I went down halfway and pulled the chain myself, watched the light click off. No flicker, no loose bulb, nothing weird. Upstairs, I noticed a small smudge near the basement doorknob. Muddy, the kind you get from stepping through wet earth. I wiped it with my thumb. Fresh. Probably came in on Dad's shoes earlier, I told myself, though I'd watched him take them off at the door like he always does. During dessert, another noise came up through the floor, a metallic clank like something brushed the furnace ducting. My mom paused mid-sentence. Even my dad lifted an eyebrow. Then, they laughed it off. Old house, my dad said. Sure, but old houses don't turn their own lights on. When my parents settled into the living room to nap off the meal, I stood by the basement door for a long moment, listening. I don't scare easily. You can't in my line of work. But that house was too quiet, the light too persistent, and those sounds felt planned. I grabbed a flashlight, opened the door, and started down the wooden stairs. Each step creaked, the kind of sound that settles into your bones if you grew up hearing it. Halfway down, the temperature dropped. You could feel the basement air hit you, cooler, heavier. My flashlight beam caught the pull chain first. It was swinging again. Not wildly, but with enough force that it hadn't started slowing yet, as if someone had just tugged it and slipped into the shadows. I scanned the room. The old freezer hummed in the corner. Boxes lined the shelves. Laundry basket waiting for wash day. Everything looked like it belonged there, but the floor didn't. Fresh mud tracked across the concrete. Dark, wet, unmistakable. Not smudges, footprints, leading from the small basement window on the left side of the house, the one near the driveway. The prints went straight toward the furnace, and then they stopped behind it. I stepped quietly, shining the flashlight around the sides of the furnace. Behind it, tucked into the narrow gap where my dad kept old paint cans, there was a bent window screen. The window above it hung slightly open, latch undone. Someone had crawled in. My arm tingled, the way it does when adrenaline catches up after your brain tries too long to be rational. Someone had been down here, might have been down here for hours, maybe longer. And the light turning on wasn't the house glitching. It was someone moving around, listening to us. I went upstairs and locked the basement door behind me. Didn't tell my parents the details. I just said they needed to go upstairs now. Then I called the non-emergency line. Police arrived fast. They swept the house, checked outside, followed the muddy prints to the window. Whoever it was had come and gone more than once. Officers guessed it might have been a transient, someone using the basement when my parents were out grocery shopping. Maybe they slipped back in when they saw the family car return, trying to grab their things. Maybe. Nobody found the person. Nobody explained anything. My dad had a metal bar installed on the basement window. New locks, too. My mom insisted it'd be one of those stories we'll laugh about next Thanksgiving. But I keep replaying one thing. Those footprints weren't wandering. They weren't random. They walked in a straight line toward the furnace. The perfect place to hide, tucked in darkness, while the voices of my parents and me drifted down through the vents. They stood there long enough to listen to us moving around, long enough to decide what they wanted to do next. Thanksgiving at our house was supposed to be simple that year. No big drama, no traveling, no giant guest list. Just me, my wife Erin, our 7-year-old son Max, and my younger brother Kyle. Turkey, football, jokes that were only funny because we were tired. Honestly, I was looking forward to it. Outside, the storm had already been loud for hours. Real Pacific Northwest stuff. Wind hammering the siding, rain hitting the windows hard enough that you could hear individual drops, branches scraping the roof like they wanted inside. Inside, everything felt warm and ordinary. The Macy's parade replayed on TV, the oven door kept fogging up, and the house smelled like rosemary and butter. We were halfway through dinner, still giving the turkey side-eye for being too dry, when the storm decided to show off. A flash lit up the whole room like a camera had gone off in our faces. 1 second later, something cracked nearby, loud enough to vibrate the table, and the entire house went dead. TV gone. Fridge silent. Overhead lights nothing. Only the candles on the table stayed alive. Max whispered, "Cool." Erin said something that definitely wasn't cool. Kyle laughed like this was all part of the plan. Welcome to rustic Thanksgiving. I grabbed the old flashlight from the junk drawer and headed for the breaker panel. Everything looked normal, not a blown fuse. Just the storm killing power up and down the street. Through the front window, every other house on the block was dark too. No porch lights, no holiday decorations, just shadow. I headed back toward the dining room, and that's when I saw it. Our sliding glass door takes up almost the whole back wall. At night, it's basically a giant mirror. But near the bottom corner, there was a small foggy patch on the outside of the glass, like someone had leaned close and breathed on it. I wiped it with my sleeve. It smeared exactly like breath would. Dog must have been here, I said, though even I didn't buy it. Ruger had been locked in our bedroom all evening because he begged too much during dinner. Ruger's in the room, Erin reminded me from behind. I didn't answer. I went back to the table. We tried to keep the mood light, candlelit Thanksgiving, kind of cozy, right? But the storm felt louder now, like the darkness outside had weight to it. Then we heard the sound. Soft, close, coming from the direction of the sliding door. It wasn't the wind, and it wasn't rain. It was subtler. Everyone stopped talking. Max looked up, wide-eyed. Kyle frowned, trying to act tougher than he felt. Erin whispered, "Was that?" I grabbed the flashlight again and walked toward the door slowly. The candlelight behind me made my reflection stretch across the glass, but the foggy patch was already returning. Bigger this time. Slow. Expanding. Exactly like someone standing inches away, breathing out. I stopped a foot from the curtain. "Don't open anything," Erin said. I didn't plan on opening a thing. I just wanted to know what was out there. I held the flashlight down at my leg so I wouldn't blind myself in the reflection. then lifted the curtain with 2 fingers and flicked the light upward. That beam hit a face. A real face, right on the other side of the glass. White skin reflecting back the light. A dark knit cap, eyes squinting against the flashlight. No surprise, just a flat, almost annoyed look, like I turned on a light too early. The face jerked back and disappeared into the black yard so fast the fog on the glass distorted as it moved. I dropped the curtain and locked the door in the same motion. Aaron grabbed Max. Kyle started checking the hallway like he expected someone at every window. I dialed 911. My voice came out tighter than I wanted, explaining that someone had been standing right up against our sliding door, watching us. The dispatcher said calls were stacked because of the storm, but they'd send someone as soon as possible. She told me not to go outside. I didn't need the reminder. We gathered in the living room with the candles, all of us listening for anything. Footsteps on the deck, the scrape of someone testing a window, anything that didn't match the storm. Even Ruger was silent behind the bedroom door. Every minute stretched like 10. By the time the officers knocked, the storm had eased up, but the house still felt strange, like all the warmth we'd had earlier was gone. 2 cops with flashlights walked the perimeter. I watched from inside as beams of light swept across the backyard. "Here," one of them called. He was crouched right at the sliding door, aiming his flashlight down. There were shoe prints in the mud, deep ones, right up against the glass. Not 1 or 2, but a trail pacing back and forth along the door, then leading to the kitchen window, like the person had been checking for entry points. The officer came inside and said, "Storm like this knocks out power, people start checking houses. Some are just looking for quick opportunities. Looks like you startled him before he tried anything." That landed wrong. Didn't make me feel safe at all. They took a report, told us to keep everything locked, and said they'd patrol the block again before finishing the shift. By then, the candles were burning low, and Max had fallen asleep against Aaron. When they left, the house felt too dark and too quiet. The next morning, I went out to look again with real daylight. The prints were clearer. Average size, cheap boot tread pattern, nothing distinct. But when I stepped back inside and really looked at the sliding door, I saw something I'd missed in the dark. 2 faint smudges, exactly at the height of that foggy patch. Not fingerprints, not a hand, lips. Someone had pressed their mouth against the glass, leaning in, testing how quietly they could breathe on it. I installed a thick wood board in the track that same day, and motion lights, and a camera, all before cleaning the dishes from Thanksgiving. And now every time we lose power, even if it's just for a split second, I automatically turn toward that sliding door, expecting a face already there, watching, breathing, waiting for us to get distracted again. I drove into Cleveland that Thanksgiving, thinking the worst thing I'd have to deal with was my dad's football commentary and my mom asking why I never visited enough. I live a couple hours away now, out near Toledo. I work long days and holidays sneak up on me.